He was one of the most qualified managers in his company, yet his achievements went ignored. Every step forward met with subtle racism and stolen credit. But when James decided to fight back, his response shocked even the most seasoned professionals. The way he took on the system will make you rethink justice. But let's start from the beginning. James Martin had always prided himself on his work ethic and qualifications. As a black manager at a prominent tech company, he was well aware of his skills and the hard work that had gotten him to where he was. Yet, despite his impressive track record, he found himself consistently overlooked for promotions. His colleagues, most of whom were white, often dismissed his contributions during meetings, taking credit for his ideas as if they were their own. The subtle microaggressions, though seemingly small, built up over time. Comments about his fit in the company culture, assumptions about his abilities, and casual remarks questioning his competence. These were the daily realities he faced. Initially, James convinced himself that things would eventually change. He was a dedicated professional, after all. He believed that with enough time, his hard work would be recognized. But as the years passed, he watched less experienced colleagues, many of whom were less qualified, climb the corporate ladder. It was a bitter pill to swallow, especially when he knew his talents were being ignored in favor of others based on factors outside his control. One day, the tension came to a head. While grabbing coffee in the break room, James overheard two colleagues openly mocking him. They questioned his leadership skills and insinuated that his position was not due to his ability, but rather because of diversity quotas. The cruel sting of their words hit harder than he expected. It wasn't just a personal attack. It was an attack on his worth and professionalism. This moment of humiliation pushed James to face the truth. It wasn't bad luck or office politics. It was systemic racism. Realizing this, he made a decision to stop internalizing the hurt and instead take action. He began documenting everything: the snubs, the ignored ideas, and the whispered comments. The evidence wasn't just for his peace of mind. James was preparing for the fight ahead. Months passed, and the discrimination James faced only worsened. Despite his hard work and clear qualifications, the company's leadership seemed determined to block his progress. The tipping point came when James applied for a senior leadership role, one that, by all metrics, he had more than earned. He had led successful projects, exceeded expectations, and consistently demonstrated his leadership abilities. Yet, once again, he was passed over. The position went to someone with half his experience and far fewer qualifications. The justification given was the vague and evasive term cultural fit, a convenient excuse often used to cover up the lack of diversity at higher levels within the company. James tried to maintain his professionalism, but the anger simmering beneath the surface was becoming harder to control. He could no longer ignore the mounting microaggressions, his colleagues interrupting him in meetings, taking credit for his ideas, and subtly undermining his authority in front of his subordinates. One incident in particular stood out. His colleague Sarah gave a presentation on a project that James had spearheaded, but she never once credited him for the work. When James confronted her, she offered a half-hearted apology, brushing off his concerns with a dismissive attitude. Her tone made it clear she thought he was overreacting. That night, James vented to his wife, Angela, as he often did when the weight of the day became too much. "It's exhausting, babe," he said. "I feel like no matter how hard I work, I'm never going to get ahead. Every step forward feels like 2 steps back." Angela, his steadfast support, listened patiently, but she also pushed him to think beyond just enduring the situation. You've got the power to change things, James. You've worked hard. You've earned your place. But sometimes, you've got to stop asking for permission to succeed. That conversation marked a shift in James. He was done waiting for someone else to notice his value. He began to take action, not just for himself, but for others who were facing the same discrimination. He reached out to a lawyer and started organizing a group of employees who had experienced similar mistreatment. The fight for justice had officially begun. Armed with a growing body of evidence and support from several colleagues, James escalated his complaints to the company's human resources department. He presented his case methodically, detailed records of microaggressions, dismissed ideas, and the pervasive atmosphere of bias he had endured. However, the response he received was as disappointing as it was predictable. The HR representative's response was dismissive and patronizing. They suggested James work on his communication style and seek feedback on how to better integrate with the team, as if the problem lay with him, not the toxic culture within the company. It became painfully clear. The company had no intention of addressing the real issue: systemic racism and ingrained bias at the highest levels. Frustrated but resolute, James decided it was time to take a more direct approach. With the help of his legal team, he filed a formal lawsuit against the company for discrimination and retaliation. But James knew that simply filing legal action wouldn't be enough to bring about change. To ensure his voice was heard, he also enlisted a media consultant to amplify the issue and bring public attention to the injustice he was facing. Just days later, a well-timed video surfaced on social media, recorded by a colleague who had secretly filmed a conversation between James and his supervisor. In the video, the supervisor explicitly labeled James as too aggressive and said he wasn't the right fit for a promotion, despite his achievements. The video quickly went viral, spreading across social platforms and media outlets. The company's reputation took a major hit, and James found himself in the public eye. But this time, it was on his terms. As the pressure mounted, James knew the battle was far from over. He didn't just want to expose the wrongdoing. He wanted to reshape the company's culture from within. He began rallying other employees, particularly people of color, and speaking openly in interviews about his experiences. His message was clear. Real change wasn't just about firing a few bad actors. It was about dismantling the structures that allowed such discrimination to thrive. In response to the mounting pressure and backlash from both the public and their employees, the company's board of directors called an emergency meeting. Their primary goal was damage control. To save face, they offered James a position on the board and promised to launch an internal diversity initiative. But James wasn't fooled by their quick gestures. He knew that real change required more than token diversity hires or one-off training sessions. It required a deep transformation of the company's culture, one that couldn't be achieved through empty promises. In a bold move, James demanded the resignation of several top executives, including his immediate supervisor, who had been one of the main culprits in his mistreatment. He made it clear that these changes were non-negotiable if the company wanted to rebuild any semblance of trust. To his surprise, the board agreed. The executives were ousted, and James was offered the role of Chief Diversity Officer, a position he had never anticipated for himself, but one he knew could give him the platform to make real, systemic change. But for James, the title was secondary. What mattered was the power to reshape the company from the inside. As Chief Diversity Officer, he immediately began restructuring the leadership team, bringing in people of color, women, and other underrepresented groups to ensure the company's leadership reflected the diversity it claimed to value. He also spearheaded policies aimed at creating a more inclusive and equitable work environment, including mandatory bias training, equal pay audits, and a revamped internal reporting system for discrimination. Slowly, the company's culture began to shift. Employees who had long felt silenced or marginalized started to feel empowered to speak out against discrimination. James had won, but more importantly, he had demonstrated that no matter how entrenched the systems of inequality may be, individuals could push back, and real change was possible. His journey became a beacon of hope for others who had been told their voices didn't matter. For James, however, this victory was just one step in the ongoing fight for equality.